Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, Deep, where were we in the last class?
Ma'am, in intro and conclusion are finished.
Yeah. Uh, so today we will we will talk about analyzing or critiquing a speech, and that would be the basis for your next assignment, assignment 5. All right. So I'll teach you how to critique or analyze a speech, and based on that, you will have to analyze a speech. Okay. So we will now listen to a speech. I have in the assignment I have sent you a link, a YouTube link. Please listen to that. It's a speech. It's a speech. Listen to the speech first, and then go on to critique or analyze based on you can thematically analyze it based on the rhetorical devices used by the speaker to uh, to make it more impactful. So the guideline or the governing idea behind critiquing a speech or analyzing a speech would be the impact that the speaker has, because ultimately the objective is to influence our audience. So, what are the strategies, the rhetorical devices, rhetorical strategies that that the speaker has used to influence the audience? Now, I'm going to play you a speech. Is everyone there in the class?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you will have to listen to the speech. Yeah. Now, this is a speech by Martin Luther King. And I think I'm sure you might be knowing this man, Martin Luther King. How many of you know him? How many of you know him? How many of you know who Martin Luther King was? No one? Or you simply don't want to tell me? Who's Martin Luther King? Yeah, tell me who's Martin Luther King. Mm, okay, okay. Anything else that you know about him? About Martin Luther King? He was, yes,
He did something about African American. I mean, I don't know much, but
okay. Yes, he was an American minister in the sense, not the political minister, but yeah, he was a Baptist activist. Uh, yes, leader of civil rights movement. Now, Martin Luther King was a black American, and he raised his voice to protest against the uh, the the racism that was going on in America. Even after the abolition of slavery, the African Americans were um, treated like slaves. They did not have equal opportunity. They did not get all the rights and privileges that the white Americans got. They were discriminated, they were segregated, they had different schools, they had different colleges. Yes, Pranab. They had different schools to go. They had different colleges. Even for that matter, if you have watched this movie, uh, what was that? Three Figures. I don't exactly remember. remember, you find these three Black American ladies working in NASA and how important their contribution was towards the space shuttle. But they had to even go to a different washroom. They even had different washrooms in public places. Also, they had different churches. They had different washrooms. They had different schools and colleges. So there was a lot of unrest among the people. And Abraham Lincoln was the president who abolished slavery, and he was pro African Americans. And during his time, I guess there was the civil rights movement, and it was Martin Luther who was a very articulate and prominent leader of the Black Americans. Now there were many, yes, Hidden Figure, correct, Anisha, Hidden Figure. Right, it's a wonderful movie. I mean, I especially enjoyed the movie, and that there are these three African American women who contributed towards in NASA. And now, at one point of time, you see them. One of these women characters, she runs quite fast because the building that she's working in, is quite far from the washroom that the Black Americans used. So she had to really run. I mean, you can see the picturization, the way that is visibly, that is very conspicuously shown in the movie. So now there were many prominent Black leaders in America at that time, but we remember Martin Luther because his protests were peaceful. He embraced and he preached non-violent way of protesting. He was not very aggressive like his counterparts. So only because he propagated a very peaceful protest against the discrimination, against racism. His name is very prominent. Now the dream, yes, Pranab, you were right. I have a dream speech. Is Gurman there in the class? His mic is still not working. Okay, I guess. So we get to see this because his means of protesting against the all the injustice done to the Black was through a very peaceful mode. And this speech especially is a very iconic speech. I have a dream speech. For their movement, for the Black American movement, but we will study this as part of our critiquing the speech. We will analyze the speech because of the numerous literary devices that Martin Luther has used in the speech. All right, now I'll play the speech. Listen to this very carefully. And then we go on to talk about what are the literary devices of
At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Time to scout.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
audible? Audible? Is this audible?
Yes. 5 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the one threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
All right, so that was the speech. The now we are going to critique the speech. We are going to see what are the different rhetorical devices that is used by Luther to make his speech very, very impactful, including the tone and the other non-vocal entities. Look at how he kept on changing the pitch of his voice. Okay, yeah. If you'd like to take screenshots, do that, because it might take me some time to send you all the PPTs. But since this is an upcoming assignment, you might need the PPTs for some kind of a reference. So you can take the screenshots of that. So critiquing I Have a Dream speech, which we have already watched. Now, much of the greatness of the speech is tied to its historical context. And I think all of you know the historical context, and we have been kind of also discussing what was the historicity behind the speech and why the speech is considered to be a great speech. Now, we will focus on 5 key lessons in speech writing that we can extract from Luther's famous speech. First, emphasize phrases by repeating at the beginning of the sentence. So, what he does is he is emphasizing all the phrases by repeating. So, repetition is a technique which he uses very, very frequently. He keeps on repeating the key ideas, the key words, the theme words throughout the speech. Says utilize appropriate quotations or allusions. Use specific examples to ground your argument, and using metaphors to highlight contrasting concepts. Now you must know what are the figures of speech. I know I should not be expecting too much, because this is all the this all this comes under a literary domain, which is not your area. But I guess you must be knowing what metaphors and similes are, isn't it? Those are the basic things which have been done in school also. So good speakers, good orators use a lot of figures of speech like metaphors, allusions, personification, simile, anaphora, okay, onomatopoeia, all this. But we will look at some basic figure of speech like metaphors, similes, and anaphora. Now, emphasizing phrases by repeating at the beginning of the sentence. So, when you keep repeating words, it is called anaphora. And this is done for a specific purpose. There is a specialized reason why we repeat, why writers or speakers repeat what they say. And this is a special figure of speech. It is commonly used as a rhetorical device So when you repeat the words twice, it sets a pattern, and repetitions emphasize the pattern and increase the rhetorical effect. So why do speakers use anaphora? Why do they repeat the initial phrases in a sentence? Because they want to create a pattern. They develop a pattern which increases the rhetorical effect. So we are basically analyzing his speech from a rhetorical point of view. And rhetorics is what is responsible for how influential your speech must be, how effective and impactful your speech is reflected in the rhetorics. So we will look at the rhetorical uh, the rhetorical perspective of the speech. Now, I have a dream speech. In this speech, I have a dream. This particular phrase is repeated in 8 successive sentences. Well, I should have asked you to have a copy of the speech text, and then it would have been easier for you to refer to. But anyways, when you're analyzing a speech, you must have the text of the speech. Uh, we don't have one, but if you could parallelly or simultaneously see the text also. I can't display the text because I'll have to display the slides. So, I have a dream is repeated in 8 successive sentences, and it is one of the most cited examples of anaphora in modern rhetoric. So, when we teach rhetorics, we give this example of anaphora because this phrase has been repeated 8 times successively, and this creates or this builds a pattern, and this pattern emphasizes the rhetorical effect. It gives a rhetorical effect to the entire speech. And look at how his tonal quality, his voice, his pitch, everything matches up with his uh, with this repetition technique also. Every time he articulates I have a dream, he uses a completely different pitch. So when you're looking at the speech, you have to listen to the speech a couple of times and then have a speech text for your reference. So every time he says I have a dream, he changes, he modulates his voice. And this is deliberate. He is trying to create an effect, a halo effect of this. Now, but this is just one of the 8 occurrences of anaphora in this speech. That means there are more anaphora, there are more repetitions in the speech. Now, let us look at these examples. By order of introduction, these are the key phrases. Paragraph 3, 100 years later. Paragraph 6, now is the time, which he repeats. In paragraph 8, he says, we must do this, we must do this. He keeps on repeating that. In paragraph 13, he, he says we can never, we cannot be satisfied. Paragraph 14 mentions go back to, and that is successively repeated. I have a dream from paragraph 16 through paragraph 24. And that is why probably this speech was named I Have a Dream. With this faith, it's repeated in paragraph 26. And from paragraphs 27 through 41, let freedom ring from all the places. He's referring to all these places. Let freedom ring from this. Let freedom ring from all the corners, from the mountains, from the hills, and everything. So this is how he has used anaphora, repetition. Now, even in the absence of the remainder of the speech, These key phrases will tell us about his story. So even if you forget or even if you don't remember what the rest of the speech is, these repetition, these phrases which are being repeated gives you a lot of idea about what he basically tries to say. So emphasis through repetition makes these phrases more memorable and by extension makes King stories more memorable. So probably if you can recall, I told you to use repetition as a technique in your own speech that you're going to deliver. So if you intermittently repeat the key phrases or the key idea, your audience remembers it better. It is quite strongly reinforced in your audience. So they are well equipped with this. Okay, so repetition is a very important technique used by major speakers. So emphasizing through repetition, if you're going to emphasize, look at the tonality also. You'll also have to look at the tonal quality of the speaker. Sometimes he raises his voice, sometimes he pauses, he slows down. So you cannot use a monotone in a speech. Using a monotone gives a very drab and dull look to your speech. So you have to add that tonal quality to your speech also to make it more interesting, more effective. And you see what you might have seen what Martin Luther does. Sometimes he keeps on modulating his pitch and voice. He raises his voice. He speaks at quick succession, and all of a sudden he slows down. At some point of time, he elongates. These are the tonal devices that Martin Luther uses, and this has a lot of impact on the listeners. So you have to just find out what are the different strategies, what are the devices which good speakers employ, starting from the way you dress up for your presentation. That's important because your appearance, your dressing sense, your grooming up, your presentability decides how your message is going to be heard, how your message is going to be accepted. So that's very vital series. That's a very vital element in speech making. And uh, and if you remember, I said that the moment you are on the stage, your audience starts evaluating you. So your dress, your presentability matters. Next is how you speak. What are the rhetorical devices that you have employed? Starting from your language, starting from the tonal quality, the vocal signature, that also matters. How clearly you are able to articulate, how emphatically and clearly you say certain things. Your articulation must be very, very clear. And you have to know what are the, because you are the speaker, so you have to decide what is it that I want my audience to remember and how am I going to present it to them. So you can emphasize repetition. Every time he said I have a dream, he said it in different ways, so vocal or tonal qualities. Now repeat the key theme words throughout your speech. Theme words, intermittently repeating. And it is a more subtle way to use repetition as well. So you keep repeating your theme words throughout. For example, if you count the frequency of words used in his speech, very interesting patterns emerge. The most commonly used noun is freedom. And interestingly, That is the primary theme of his speech. Freedom is used 20 times in the speech. He has used freedom, this term freedom, 20 times throughout his speech. And interestingly, that's the primary theme of the speech, isn't it? Freedom. He's talking about freedom. Freedom from slavery, freedom from racial injustice, freedom from segregation, the pain of segregation. So, freedom, he's talking about freedom. And that has been repeated 20 times in the speech. See, freedom is repeated 20 times. Uh, you get me, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how you're going to analyze the speech. All right. So you might be getting this assignment in a day or two, maybe tomorrow, where you are asked to analyze a speech in not more than 250 words.
And we have got it
Oh,
tomorrow yesterday.
yes, yes. So you have to analyze the speech in 250 words, and you can talk about the rhetorical devices. Uh, Predominantly, it is the rhetorical devices that you have to talk about, what the speaker is using, and this is how you're going to do that. Okay, so look at the theme words that have been repeated throughout the speech. Freedom 20 times, we 30 times, our 17 times, you 8 times, nation 10 times, America 5 times, American 4 times, justice 8 times, injustice 3 times, and dream 11 times. So, justice, dream, freedom, keywords. Okay, that is how you analyze. Now, look at this graffiti. Now, the entire speech can be summarized in this particular view, which associates the size of the word. Look at the size of different words. All these words are used by Martin Luther. Now, the point is the size of these words reflected here uh, is equal is yes, yes, yes. You have to analyze the commencement speech by Steve Jobs. I'm just giving you an example here. Why was that impactful? What are the rhetorical devices used? Now, the entire speech is based on three little stories that he has said. He says, I'm going to connect the three dots. And since you have already, you have uh, a greater knowledge about his life through the documentary that was played, I think you'll be able to do it well. You'll be able to relate the three dots, the three connecting dots, the three connecting stories of his life. And look at the last phrase that he says. Stay hungry, stay foolish. So you can analyze that. Now, coming back to this, you see the size of the word is associated with its frequency, with the way it is used, the number of times it is used in the speech. So, freedom is very conspicuously visible, very predominant here. So, freedom is a word which is used repeatedly. Similarly, nation, justice, Negro, America, Mississippi, come, faith. And look at this word uh, color. It's mentioned in very small fonts. So that is that means that it is not used much or with a lot of frequency in the speech. So the size of the word is related with the frequency it has been used. Utilizing appropriate quotations or allusions. Now, evoking historic and literary references is a powerful speech writing technique, where you can directly quote or you can implicitly make allusions to. You don't have to directly quote, you can make some allusions. Now, this also helps you improve your credibility because you are quoting or you are referring to credible speakers in your speech. So, directly quoting or making allusions to the speaker affects your credibility. For example, look at these allusions made by Martin Luther. See, most of you have told me that Martin Luther was a Baptist minister. So when he was a minister, he was a preacher, some kind of a Christian preacher. So he has made a lot of allusions to the Bible, especially to the Old Testament. He has made a lot of reference to the Old Testament throughout the speech. He says, 50 years ago, in paragraph 2, this is an allusion to Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address, where Lincoln starts by saying 7 years ago. Okay, and this allusion is particularly poignant because King Martin Luther is speaking in front of the Lincoln Memorial. You can see the Lincoln statue in between, isn't it? At the backdrop, you're able to see the Lincoln statue. It's the Lincoln Memorial that he's speaking. So it makes sense when when he is making allusions to Lincoln's Gettysburg speech, where he says 7 years ago, and Martin Luther says 50 years ago. He's also referring to life, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in paragraph 4. And this has a direct reference to the United States Declaration of Independence, a very important document for the Americans, legal and important documents for the Americans. So, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Every American citizen has a right to life, liberty, and pursuit. So, Martin Luther says that even the black people also have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So, he's referring to the US Declaration of Independence. And he makes a number of biblical allusions, which provides the moral basis for King's arguments. So when he's referring to these biblical allusions, what he's doing is, since he is also a Baptist minister, Christian preacher, this gives a backdrop, this gives a cornerstone, a grounding to his arguments, a moral grounding to his arguments. He says, it came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. This has a direct allusion to Psalms. Psalms is one of the texts of the Old Testament. Or let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. In paragraph 8, this is evoked in Jeremiah, again an Old Testament reference. Okay, for my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me. This is what God, Jehovah, says to the Jewish community. It says, look, you are suffering, you don't have a home, you are moving from here and there. It's because you have forsaken me, you have left me, the fountain of the living water, and dug out cisterns for themselves, cracked cisterns that can hold no water. This has a reference to the Old Testament, which Martin Luther is alluding to. Now, you can use specific examples, give specific examples to ground your argument. So Martin Luther is giving specific, providing very, very vivid, specific examples. And this gives a grounding to his argument. He gives the names of the places. He talks about several names like Mississippi, New York, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina. All these are places where racism was at its peak. The South of United States, the states that belong to the southern part, since the plantation was more, the slavery was more. So they were quite rigid. Mm, they were not convinced. The white masters were not convinced to let go of their black slaves. So it was in the south of America that the resistance was more to the black freedom. Okay, so Martin Luther accomplishes um, the logical arguments to illustrate, by giving specific examples. He makes numerous references to the geographic locations, gives real places in America, Alabama, Mississippi. He keeps on talking about them. In New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Colorado, all these places, Tennessee, Mississippi. These are the places where there was a lot of slavery, and the white people resisted a lot, not to bring in the civil rights laws. So he's addressing to the white people of these areas. Now use metaphors to highlight contrasting concepts. Now this is something which all great speakers do. You must be able to delineate what are the metaphors. Metaphors allow you to associate your speech concepts with concrete images and emotions. So when you give a metaphor, when you give a symbol, this is the speaker associates this symbol, this image, with certain concrete concepts. So and what Martin Luther does is he contrasts between two abstract concepts. Like he says, joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. Daybreak, which is dawn, and long night. Contrasting images, contrasting metaphors. And he is deliberately highlighting the contrasting concepts to bring in his point in a more effective way, in a more cascading way. So the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean, lonely island, vast ocean, contrast of material prosperity. Rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. So we want to rise from the dark and desolate valley of, we don't want to be segregated. We want to go to the mainstream. Like common people like me and you would have said, we don't want to be segregated. Segregation is very agonizing. But what does he say? He says that we need to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation, metaphors, contrasting metaphors, to the sunlit path of racial justice. So, racial justice is equivalent to a sunlit path, and racial injustice or segregation, discrimination, is like a dark and desolate valley. Now, this sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. Sweltering summer vis-a-vis invigorating autumn. Okay, so they are highlighting he's highlighting the contrasting images. And this enhances the poeticity of the speech thousandfolds. Sweltering with the heat of oppression will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. The heat and oasis. So that's your assignment that I've already given you. All right. Okay, any questions? Any quick questions? I think you have understood this. Yeah. Deep, have you joined from two gadgets?
Yes, ma'am.
Why? What happened?
Nothing, ma'am.
Okay. Uh, So this is the assignment. You have to listen to the speech more than a couple of times. Have a copy of the speech text. When you need to have the copy of the speech text. Had it been in a class, I would have asked you to get a copy, or I could have showed you, but it's not possible here. So you must have the copy handy with you for reference. So get a copy of the speech text, and then go on to analyze it, critique it based on the rhetorical the impact the speech makes with the rhetorical devices, with the uh, tonal or the vocal, non-vocal entities like the tone, the pitch, sometimes the rate of speaking. Sometimes they speak at a faster rate, and then they slow down, the speakers slow down. So what does this mean? And the one that I showed you has all the paragraphs references, so you have to also give those paragraph references, which paragraph, which line, everything. They should be there. Okay. All right. Don't have to worry about 250 words. It can be a little longer, but don't make it very, very, uh, very lengthy. It should be restricted to one page, one A4 size sheet, not more than that, not more than an A4 size sheet. All right. Is it
Ma'am,
clear?
how will know about which paragraph it is?
Get a speech text with you. Have a speech text of the speech. Or else, how do you uh, make an analysis? You must have a copy of it, no?
Ma'am, means if we see it from the video, we'll not understand now which
You
paragraph.
will,
We have to.
yeah, you can't understand which paragraph. You can't make reference to. You will have to have a speech text with you.
Yes, ma'am. We have to search it on the internet.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. I think it must be there. I don't know. I've not searched for, but I think it must be there.
Okay.
And moreover, you all internet savvy people, no YouTubers and all. So, oh, see, Shivam Srivastava is so fast, very quick. Good.
Yeah, clear, ma'am.
Yeah, so good, Shivam. So that's the reference. That's the link he has given all of you for your reference. So get the copy of the speech text. Keep it handy with you. Have it at hand. Read it. Analyze it. Look at the repetition of words. Look at the different um, the metaphors that he has used. Look at the other rhetoric and linguistic devices that Jobs has used, and be a little specific. Mention the paragraph. All right. Okay. So I think this is clear, and I'll see you. Yeah, Anisha.
No, ma'am, I'm saying yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all.